Hey guys, I just want to cover this post in the newly formed Pro-Male Association. It's a great post. Our response to those who compare us to radical feminism. Now, that Orwell quote, right? In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And that's why we're considered radicals. We are 100% correct, right? So our detractors, of course, who get angry that we don't provide a big tent to allow all kinds of infiltrators in to water down our message, they get upset. They call us radicals. Now I'm going to read this. Since the subreddit's inception, many detractors have criticized our moderation and treatment towards feminists and hijackers. Yeah, we ban those people. They argue that we should adopt a more nuanced and open-minded approach to avoid radicalism. In other words, don't be effective. He's even going to say that, right? There's no nuance here. You don't need nuance. What we're saying is true, and it's to defend ourselves as human beings. We're for equality. There's no nuance necessary, right? Believing that radicalization will inevitably lead to intolerance and bigotry. They claim that we are hysterical and extreme, that fighting unapologetically for men's rights makes us morally equivalent to the matriarchal oppressor, right? Even that expression will be considered radical, especially if we use the same tactics, strategies, and arguments and rhetoric, right? Well, we're just fighting fire with fire. Because the feminists, by the way, have been successful for the last 50 years. The men's rights movement has been a failure for 50 years. And why are they a failure? Because they want to be moderates. In other words, they want to fight with women. It's that simple. Due to how popular these kinds of criticisms are, they have anchored themselves in people's minds, gaining legitimacy and credibility. Therefore, this criticism may seem appealing on the surface level, but throughout this reading, you will see quickly collapses under scrutiny. All right. Now he's going to name them. What's his name, by the way? Agitated Climate. You're doing a great job, right? Firstly, I want to give those critiques some credit in them highlighting objective drawbacks and outward radical expression. Radicalism can indeed produce counterproductive outcomes. If a movement relies exclusively on maximalist rhetoric without strategic nuance, it can alienate potential allies and slow practical progress. This is a legitimate tactical observation, right? Now, truth. Potential female allies will never genuinely convert because they're our oppressors. That's who we're fighting against. Alienating them carries no real strategic cost. You cannot lose what you never had. Thank you. Thank you. Right? Number two, why it doesn't apply in this context. However, this argument loses its practical force when taking into account the structural, systemic, and social conditions that collectively foreclose the possibility of genuine female allyship in our current society. Women are institutionally incentivized to preserve the very order the Pro-Male Association exists to dismantle. Courting the approval of a group conditioned against granting it is not a tactical drawback worth accommodating. Well, they're not just conditioned, right? It's self-interest. You don't have to be conditioned for self-interest. That's the only thing I have to say about this paragraph. Women gain by their hatred of men, right? Now, the theory, radical perspectives that frame women as inherently oppressive will make female allies disengage entirely rather than continue examining our position. Oh, sorry, I read that too early. That is the answer to this, not up here. Sorry. Okay. Women who are politically uninformed or undecided are more likely to be recruited into a movement through recognition of shared values than through language that immediately positions them as part of the problem. Now, the truth, coalition building with women produces only dilution and infiltration of core values. The pragmatic case for moderation collapses entirely. Exactly. Like the KKK members, like the civil rights movement did not prioritizing having white people a part of their movement. They accept ones that are genuine, but they didn't prioritize it. Right? Now, potential institutional allies such as legislators, judges, organizers who might advance concrete policy goals often require coalition building language that maximalist rhetoric makes impossible. Now, truth, internal movement cohesion is more valuable than external palatability. We men can only rely on ourselves. That's a fact. Look, feminists use the most radical, extremist, hateful rhetoric they can, and society accepts them and supports them. It's that simple. So it might be an uphill climb, but trying to gain some kind of, group cohesion with women is a complete waste of time. The average woman is a feminist. I ask women in my family, do they believe in A, the glass ceiling, and B, the wage gap? They believe in it. And when you try to correct them, they fight you. The average woman is a feminist. So there's no pool out there amongst the average woman. The woman who will ally with the pro-male collective will be extreme outlier. Now, clarification. This does not mean that it is physically impossible to have a pro-male woman in our ranks. Yeah, I just mentioned it, right? I'm currently working with two of them, but we did not bend our rules. We did not mince our words. We have remained the same, unflappable, honest, and straightforward. Despite this, they have decided to join us and work alongside us for the sake of male freedom and gender equality. Right. There you go. There are a couple of female outliers, but there's no point trying to make this a Big Ten because the average woman is against us. Right? The KKK is actually a minority. Can you imagine if the average white guy really was a racist? Hypocrisy, double standards, and dishonesty. Now let's address the main issue and dismantle the core belief surrounding anti-radicalism. Upon closer examination, this argument is both logically inconsistent and fundamentally in bad faith. Thank you. Thank you. It is a strategic tool designed to delegitimize resistance while leaving the conditions that produce it entirely untouched. Exactly. Ineffective. This cry for us to be moderate, which hasn't worked, has proven not to work for 50 years, is a cry for us to lose, right? It applies an asymmetric standard. The demand for nuance and moderation is directly, exclusively at the oppressed group, never at the structures oppressing them, right? Feminists and adjacents rarely apply the same standard to matriarchal institutions, which have historically used extreme, codified, and violent means to maintain dominance. The very conditions that produce pro-male radicalism in the first place. It confuses equivalence with similarity. Using assertive tactics, confrontational rhetoric, or uncompromising demands does not make a movement morally equivalent to its opposition. That is so 100% true, right? We're the good guys. They're the bad guys. So us using their tactics does not change that. The content and direction of the politics matters enormously. A liberation movement fighting for men's basic fundamental human rights is not morally equivalent to a structure that denies those things, regardless of how loudly either speaks. Man, this man's hitting it out of the park. It is a tone policing argument dressed as ethical philosophy. Be less radical, directed at an oppressed group, functionally means make your resistance more comfortable to those benefiting from your oppression. Oh, just you hit it right out of the park. It is demand for palatability, not a genuine ethical concern. Yeah, he called out those liars, didn't he? It ignores what produces radicalism. Movements radicalize in response to conditions. Exactly. The MRM wouldn't exist if women weren't attacking and oppressing men. Remember, the men's right movement came after feminism, not before. The content we analyzed throughout the numerous posts I made in this subreddit demonstrates precisely what those conditions look like. Asking men to respond moderately to genocidal violence, yes, and institutionalized androcide is not a nuanced position. It is a demand that the victim calibrate their distress to comfort of bystanders. Right. Yeah. You know, my channel has been growing steadily, very slowly, but steadily. Because guys respect someone who makes a stand. The underlying intention of such arguments, this argument is itself a political tactic. Yes, recognize it. Just a minute here. Let's see. One specifically designed to delegitimize resistance by reframing its intensity as its primary moral failing, displacing attention from the conditions that necessitated it entirely. Right, exactly. Again, guys, I want to say this again. In the UK, there are no staring laws in the transit. And they asked for a 6 p.m. curfew for men in Britain. Innocent men. That is radical attack on men's rights as human beings. So us simply talking 100% against that and just saying, no, that is evil, that is very tiny next to what they're trying to do to us, right? Radicalism is a vital and non-negotiable stance. Thank you. Radicalism means uncompromisingly pursuing our core demands. And this is historically the only way to produce meaningful structural change. Like the civil rights movement. They didn't moderate and say we got to add KKK members to our groups, to our ranks. The movements that ended slavery, secured labor rights, and dismantled legal apartheid were all considered radical and dangerous by the standards of their time. They were, right? It didn't happen before. In the face of severe structural oppression, moderation is not a virtue. It is a strategic concession to the status quo. Thank you. Now, in conclusion, we men should be as radical as the conditions it is responding to require. And given the evidence I have shared throughout my posting history, from genocidal rhetoric to institutionally sanctioned murder and castration of men that is celebrated by hundreds of thousands of people, The conditions require quite a lot, to say the least. Now, this was a great post by Agitated Climate. This is where I believe he backtracks a bit. Another important issue to address concerning the negative consequences of radicalization is that even in a scenario where seeking cooperation with members of the oppressive group is suboptimal, maximalist rhetoric can still have drawbacks such as alienation of men themselves. All I got to say about that, Agitated Climate, is too bad. Because we can't have it both ways. I say what I say 100%. I mean it. And I don't mince words, like you said earlier. And there are men who respect me for it. This may sound counterintuitive, but men will be reluctant to join a fight against female supremacy if they are too aggressive. Well, men don't want to fight women. Men are obsessed with women. They worship women. But that's one of our messages. You got to get over that. This is primarily because men are uninformed about their oppression and how politics work. It's not that they're uninformed alone. It's that. But also when you try and school them, they fight back because men, to some degree, love their oppression. They are blinded by the culture and social conditioning that leaves them ignorant and in the narrows. Well, dude, I have to say, Agitated Climate, the men's rights movement's going on for 50 years. So how uninformed can men actually be? They're uninformed because they don't want to know, right? Therefore, despite our desire to help men and our commitment to achieving positive results for them, we will unfortunately appear as monsters that women have portrayed men to be in their propaganda. I can live with that. I can live with that. I didn't dive into this topic because the post was already too long. However, I may write a short post addressing the issue in more detail. Well, you can agitate it, but I'm just saying I'm 100% against that because we have too much experience. It leads nowhere. All the men's right. Look, you don't know how many times someone showed up at my channel or one of the other pro male channels like Shield for Man or Mr. Pink and Yellow. Excuse me. And said, geez, I finally found you guys. Right? We're just going to have to accept growing slowly and getting the men who matter. All these guys who don't want to fight for themselves, there's nothing we can do about that. We can only grow our own group slow, as quickly as we can and make headway. And I'm all for that. We'll end it here.